is the Rangers Journal Night.
Well, hello and welcome to the Rangers Journal. You join us midway through, I guess, the international break. We are back, proper football at the weekend. We always kind of like to do something to keep the pod going when we're in these international breaks or, the close season. And tonight really is one of the debates for the centuries, and that is the enigma that is James Tavernier. So we're going to go over his whole time at the club, what he means to us just now, what he's meant to us in the past, where he's basically, what's his position as a Rangers player overall. Dave, say hello to you first, mate. Are you okay tonight?
Aye, not bad, mate. Not bad. Just desperate for the real football to get back here.
And Ross, there's nothing like a good old argy-bargy on a Monday night, is there?
Oh, I've been looking forward to this one. I've been planning my strategy on how to attack this one. And I think, like most of you, I'm kind of somewhere in between both ends of the spectrum. But yeah, looking forward to getting into it, lads. I haven't been on a few in a week or so. So good evening, everyone watching at home. Evening, lads. Thanks for having me on.
And Doug, come to you last. Thank you very much. You've done a lot of work tonight with the slides we're going to be using. So thank you for that. And how are you this evening?
Good, here to try and provide a positive spin on everything, as always. Looking forward to it.
Ross, I'm going to throw the first question to you. James Tavernier made his Ibrox debut on the 8th of August 2010. Who was that against?
Oof. Goodness me. Oh, you've got me there, Billy. I'm guessing it's a pre-season friendly. So
you're right.
It could be anyone. It could
on
be,
you go, Dave.
Isn't it the Hibs 6-2 game, mate?
No, you're way off. Doug, you want to have a guess?
It was for Newcastle in a friendly against us, was it not?
You're quite correct. He made his Ibrox debut 8th of August 2010, coming on as an 81st minute sub. It was a find by the Rangers archive, who Tomo spoke to a few weeks back, but I came across one of their posts on it, and he looks like a baby in comparison to what he looked with, because he does come to us 5 years later, almost dead on 5 years, 20th of July, signed by Mark Warburton from Wigan, same day I believe as Martin Waghorn. Dave, I mean, I didn't know I didn't know that he played against us for a start, but did you know anything about him when he first signed?
No, mate, it was a relatively unknown quantity, to be honest. I was the same as you. I didn't know that he'd played that friendly for Newcastle against us. So yeah, it was unknown quantity. I think you didn't really know what you were getting at that stage of our journey back up the leagues, did you? So yeah, no.
At all. Ross, so he signs as a right back. Mark Warburton obviously knew of him, or was it Frank McParland, the best in the business? Is that his name? Brings him to Rangers. We don't know anything about his leadership qualities, but what I do remember in the first season was he scored a good couple of free kicks, which really endeared me in the beginning to him. Do you remember much of his early time?
I do. I remember it was. I remember there was quite a lot of hope and optimism when Warburton came in, and look, I think some of the players that he brought in, I thought Waghorn was a decent enough player. A few others that we probably won't mention, but Tavernier definitely sticks out as the one that's kind of stood the test of time with this. I think Dave, you mentioned there that the Hibs game that was one that kind of always remember. I think for a couple of seasons there, Hibs seemed to be a bit of a bogey team. We had a bit of a rivalry with them, a real quite intense few games in there. But no, he came in, he managed to lock down that position pretty quickly, and seemed to be an impressive player and someone that we've not really had for a while at Ibrox, which is someone to attack from wing backs, really. And Tavernier did it so well, as you said, notching a few goals in his first season, and little did we know the goal scoring machine that he'd turn out to be.
And Doug, I'll keep on that kind of early signing, kind of first season, Warburton's first season. I guess he impressed you back then. I mean, we weren't expecting him to, be scoring goals as taking us to the Europa League finals, but he certainly, for me, started quite well.
Absolutely, and I mean, Dave's quite right. And I think most fans probably do remember him initially from that 6-2 game, because I just remember not just him, but the whole team were so forward-thinking and so attacking, and it did really seem like we were on to a really exciting period. because here we were with our right back scoring a screamer, and at multiple points being like in the box and like right at the penalty spot, and like sitting there thinking, what is he doing away up there? And that would become would become a trend that he's continuing to this day. So certainly didn't know what we were getting at the time, but did, I have to say, admittedly look exciting from the get-go.
Football definitely changed in this time period overall, I guess, from the great Barcelona team. For me, Ross, seeing a right back that was in the box as much as he was. Let me just talk about a few that, because I've got a little bit of an outline for this evening. So the strength of James Tavernier, for me, the attacking threat. So remarkable goal scoring, an assist record, and include penalties and free kicks in that as well. But for me, it was the runs forward. Does that stand out as his best thing for you, Ross?
In his whole time, or early career, or
no. We'll go general now. Sorry, we'll go general now. Let's just, because we need to talk about it as a whole.
Think certainly his attacking prowess, but I'd go further than that and actually say his finishing ability. I think the guy, you don't often see him getting loads of chances, but he does tend to score lots of goals, which shows that he's obviously got quite a potent nature about him. I look back at some of the moments in the Europa League run when he would be back in that back post, against Dortmund, against Leipzig, and that's kind of the Tavernier that I think of and remember fondly. That sort of late run into the box, very clinical in his finishing. Some of his free kicks have been wonderful. Goals outside the box, goals inside the box. For me, his finishing is unbelievable, and I think in his first couple of years, perhaps he was getting a few more assists. Although I'm sure we'll come on to some sort of graphic later on that will dictate that for us. But I think now his game definitely seems to be that more of an end product, which is, I think, probably been a bit of a hindrance for him in a sense as well, and a hindrance to the overall progression and development of the team in a way.
And we will look at that graphic, the one you're talking about, just in a little minute. The other kind of quality that I highlighted from Dave wasn't just his attacking, but in my opinion, his captaincy and leadership skills. Now, we've had many complaints about him not being the most vocal on the pitch, but he's one of these players that does his talking with his footballing ability. Do you agree that his captaincy and his leadership skills are something we should appreciate? Feel free to disagree.
I think we should, to be fair. I think part of the problem for Tavernier is he almost suffers from kind of probably, I was going to say older fans, but my generation of fans that, grew up with likes of the Goff or Amoruso that, would scream at players, but the game's moved on since then. You don't really see captains in that vein anymore. Probably be an HR complaint if they did. But Tavernier very much has led by example. And do you know what? I do think we probably should have parted ways in the summer, but I don't think it should be forgotten the amount of times that he's literally dragged us over the line. Countless examples where he has stepped up. He's scored that one goal that's kind of taken the win for us. And I think he's just a different kind of captain to what a lot of fans are used to.
Doug, one last kind of area of feel free to come back to any other points, but and also and during the rest of the pod, guys, feel free to bring up his any points. But he's consistently fit, which is another kind of tick in his box. I don't remember him really having any long-term injury. Now, we can accuse him of having maybe looking a little leggy at the beginning of a couple of seasons, but certainly he's always been pretty much 99% available.
Absolutely, and it's I think one of the reasons that we need to, one of the things we need to remember about him as well is that he's always been there. In addition to being the guy who's been able to, like Dave said, make important moments and score important goals, he's also always been there. He's a steady influence, which during certain periods of time I think has been crucial because of the other injuries the team has had. Like you say, I think he's only ever had one in his time with us. He's only ever had one injury that kept him out for any length of time, and that was about 2 months. And other than that, maybe a knock here and there, and that was it. obviously he's had that little injury at the start of this year, but that consistency can't be underplayed, and also probably is playing a part. Or in fact, I feel almost guaranteed it's playing a part in what we're seeing in this latter half or latter part of his career with us now. Because we'll see it in one of the later graphics, but the amount of games season after season after season that he has played, he has never had a season where he's played less than 44 games. And bearing in mind that practically 99% of those games played, he's played 90 minutes of them, because you very, very rarely see him get subbed either. Again, a handful of times here or there. So this is a guy that has played a phenomenal amount of football at a high level year upon year upon year. And I think that's, unfortunately, now that he is getting older, now that his pace is dropping off a bit, we're starting to see the effects of that now. And that's sort of leading to what we'll, I'm sure, discuss a little further on.
Yeah, well, I'll pull up this one. Hopefully this is one that you were talking about. This is a year on year. So in how many years I'm trying to count? What's that? 9 years he's been with us. I shouldn't have to know that. Playing 467 games. I think it's astounding, really. As you say, Dougie, very rarely gets drops. But let's pick a season out, and I'll have a look myself at the is it 21-22 season we got to the Europa League finals? Am I in the right one? Thanks, Doug, for
I think it was. I think it was, yeah.
So 18 goals, 17 assists, but I wouldn't, it's not even his best. I think he played fantastic for us in that season, but there's quite a number of other seasons you could point to being, as good or better. Any of these kind of years stand out for you, Ross?
Well, I think that one that you were exactly saying there, and look, I think a lot of these are you're looking at him in isolation, which by all means the stats are great. Look, the stats are great for an attacking midfielder or a striker. I think that's the context. They're fantastic stats, and these aren't seasons when we've had other players that have been prolific. Tavernier has been head and shoulders in terms of his return on from a goals point of view than a lot of those other players. So the context is that he has been playing in an underperforming team for many years. That 21-22 season is an exception from that, and obviously the one we won the 55. But his actual contribution from a goals point of view is nothing short of remarkable. And this is down. This is binary. This isn't opinion based. This is black and white. This guy has scored those goals, so nothing can ever take that away from him, and he has put these performances in. So I think we are treading a very fine line, and the fan base should be very conscious of that at a lot of the noise that we're hearing at the minute, because the contribution that he's given, if it wasn't there in these past few seasons, we would be in an even worse position than we are now. So I think people just need to bear that in mind when they're considering tweets and statuses and posts about Tavernier.
Well, don't worry anyone who's sitting there annoyed that we're maybe focusing on his good points, because there is a section called the criticisms of James Tavernier coming up shortly. But Dave, looking at the even last season, 23-24, 58 appearances, 24 goals and 12 assists. I mean, it is astounding, but it's also, as Ross is saying, it's quite worrying that no one else has stood up to give those kind of figures.
It is, mate. And, just to put that into context, so a lot of people are saying we should lay off Cyril Dessers after last season because he got 20 league goals. Or 20 goals, sorry. So did Tav. But yeah, nobody's kind of sticking up for that. And do you know what? Some people will look at this and they'll say, oh, but how many of those are penalties? I've never bought into that narrative because, yeah, there might well be penalties. You've still got to stand up and take them. And actually, in some respects, they'll be harder because you've got the time to think. You've got the goalie trying to psych you out. The entire stadium's kind of sat there with bated breath waiting for it. So I don't actually care if they're penalties, free kicks, or open play goals. As Ross said, these are actual numbers that this guy has posted. And I think Ross was bang on in his opening bit. There's a question to be asked about whether it's good for us as a team that our right back is scoring this many goals. But I mean, the numbers don't lie. 24 goals is a bloody good return for any player on the pitch, let alone a defender.
Doug, you collated these stats for us. Thanks again. But was there anything that stood out to you that you were surprised at when you were going through these?
Not particularly. I mean, maybe I'd forgotten a couple of the earlier years that were a little bit leaner. I think I'd kind of just gone lost in the fact that he'd gotten like 15 plus goals and assists pretty much every year. So maybe that a little bit. But to be honest, not really, because I mean that has been what he has done year on year. He's always been a big contributor. Just to answer Dave's question, by the way, 67 of those goals are penalties, so it's just under half, I think. Which I mean, like Dave says, loads of people like to hold that against him, and it's like I never see anyone criticize Ronaldo because he scored a crap ton of penalties. I never see anyone criticize Messi for having scored a bunch of penalties, but suddenly when it's James Tavernier, it's Hotham penalties, it doesn't count. But not to conflate, before someone says it, not to conflate James Tavernier with those two, but as two other footballers who divide certain opinions. But yeah, as you know, like Ross said, it's just a statistical, factual thing that these are goals and assists that he has contributed to our side year on year that we're not getting from elsewhere. And if we were, and in fact the one season we did get numbers from 3, 4, 5 other players that were similar to this, we won the league. Every other year we've got maybe 1 or 2 approaching. Say one of our better years was actually last year when we had Sima and Dessers, who both got high numbers. What did we do? We were right in the title race until near the end when we kind of folded. And I think that really demonstrates the fact that we talked about like captaincies a little bit earlier and the job of the captain. He is a quieter guy. He's not the raging type. I think a lot of people really are pointing that out right now because they feel angry, and so they want to see that reflected in the players. And so the fact that he's not that type makes them feel more angry, and they're like, oh, why does he not feel raging like I am? And I think that's just the way that he is as a player. And like you say, you don't get that captain in general. But for me, the captain is always the guy that tries to get that little extra out of the team when it matters most, or provides that little extra. And I think that is something he has done at certain key moments. He hasn't done them in all in key moments. He's maybe not done it enough in key moments. But he can't do it all himself. And I think for me, that's the ultimate caveat of his overall time, is that he did as much as he could, but only one man can do so much.
Ross, let's move on and get to the kind of nitty-gritty, the criticism of James Tavernier. Now, we can look at stats, and in fact, the manager after the Hotham game came out and used stats to make us basically try and pull the wool over their eyes to see what we watched was not what we actually watched, because based on these stats, we were just as it was an even game. But James Tavernier in that match for me made another mistake of losing his man with Maeda, getting in and tipping in front of him. That goal, I feel, has been scored a number of times, and he has been the one that's been the problem for it. There is a problem with his defending. Sure, we can't deny that.
Yeah, and I'll be the first to admit that. We're all aware of the frailty at that side, and the amount of times we've seen teams target that side because there's been joy there, right? And we know that. I guess my question back is that if he was a fantastic defender and he was a 10 out of 10 in every area, well, he wouldn't be playing at Rangers, and that's just a cold hard fact. That's just the way it is. We know that he's got frailties in certain areas. Arguably in the air, he gets turned quite a lot. His pace seems to be dropping a bit, and he gets caught out of position through the way that we play football. But my kind of retort to that would be, why have we not built a team that uses his extraordinary abilities going forward to protect us better in that area? We know that that's an area that gets targeted. If that means we have to play asymmetrically at the back to compensate, why aren't we doing that? This guy has been prolific for years, and the assists and goals. So why have we not shielded that better by creating a formation that is more tactically astute to the frailties that he has? To me, it's wild. I saw a great comment in there. Ian Thompson put, his abilities have been so far ahead of the rest of the league that any drop in form will be unfairly assessed. At his best, he's virtually irreplaceable. and I completely agree. But at his best, he's going forward. So for me, it's about why have we not learned from those 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 goals that we've seen in that same way, and look to protect him more. Maybe it needs to be, a Sterling in the 3 in the back who then drops into the right back, or something along those lines that just adds a little bit. Or Sterling is that central player who drops in there. Whatever it is, maybe that's not the right solution. But at the end of the day, the guy is I think a super player going forward, and we should be more. We should be smart to that and more reactive. But to answer your question, yes, he's certainly frail at the back, and we're definitely finding out this year he's been exposed a number of times, and obviously the microscope's on him, so it looks 10 times worse.
Ross, I'll stay with you because I was just making a comment. I just wanted to kind of pass comment on what you were saying about building a tactical structure that takes advantage of the benefits. I don't feel that we've had that since Steven Gerrard and having Ryan Jack kind of cover him. And we've tried it in various guises, and it's either they've not been a clever enough player to, recognise the danger with Ryan Jack, and unfortunately he just was too injury prone. Am I right in thinking that? Is that the last time we probably protected him?
I'd say so as well. And look, I mean, I wouldn't be the first, or I wouldn't be the last person to wistfully look back at Daniel Candeias either. But it's, it was only a matter of time before Candeias came up tonight, surely. But even in that example, I don't think Tavernier's had the protection from that right winger in many years to read it and understand an overlap and drop in. We haven't really had that, and potentially that's why he was trying to look at playing Sterling out there. When he was experimenting that way last season with some levels of success. But I think you're right. I think, yes, it has been a while since we've done it, but I just can't get my head around why we haven't really protected the guy. I think one other thing I just wanted to add is, we got this guy in the Championship. He wasn't playing regular football for, I think it was Wigan we got him from.
Yeah.
And it's not his fault that he isn't the player that everyone heralds him to be at times, or his defensive ability doesn't necessarily replicate his offensive ability. That's not his fault. I have no doubt that he gives everything, and that he is trying 100% on the pitch. Maybe our expectations and what we want from him are overshadowed by his ability going forward, and therefore we've kind of actually missed or lost sight of actually that this player was a Championship sub that we brought in and has grown and developed within our ranks.
Dave, another bullet point I had under the criticism is pressure in big games. There is a perception that in the big games he just doesn't, not have it, but he lacks it. Whether it's mentality, whether he gets, goes into his shell. Can you explore whether that's fair or not?
I think in some games, yeah. I don't think you can just sort of wrap a blanket. He struggles in all big games around it. I think there are games where he has stood up and been counted. The Europa League run is probably a prime example of that, where there's some huge games and he had real influence on those games. However, as Ross said, you look at the Celtic games. How many times have we seen that same struggle? And I'm sure Doug's got some stats that'll tell me it's not all as bad as I think it is. But as I've said before on the pod, I'm probably more of an eye test guy. I mean, I look at the stats, I'm interested in them. Obviously, they do have meaning, but they don't always tell you the full picture, as we saw with what you alluded to with Clement after the last Old Firm. And for me, and this is just my opinion, but going by the eye test, he's had a torrid time in some of those games. And I do think what Ross says is valid. Where's the help? There's 11 players on that pitch, not just Tav. So there's definitely an argument that actually we should have been helping him out a bit more. But for me, he has struggled in those games. And, I'm not terribly... I don't want to say I'm not interested in stats. Of course, they do mean something, but we've seen it with our own eyes.
Fair enough. Doug, I'll come to you on the kind of criticism side. I can think of 3 cups that we probably should have won. We probably should have beaten Hibs having gone ahead after the Old Firm win. We should have beat Kilmarnock at Ibrox and went on to probably win that league. Was it Scottish Cup? And also that same year, we should have won both cups. They'll come the top of my head now. Can I blame James Tavernier for all of them? No, and I don't think he was the captain for the first one, but he's lost a lot of finals, or certainly a fair amount of important games. We must be able to question something about his mentality.
Well, the first thing I would say is that he's not lost finals. Rangers have lost finals.
Yeah, I understand.
And which is my first comeback, and that's my first comeback to any time, because I don't have any truck with this thing when people try and pigeonhole it to one person, because it's a team game, whether he's the captain or not. Now, it comes back to, I think, the point I made before, where to me, the captain's job is to get that little extra out of the team where he can. Now, there's only so much he can do in that regard. And I think when you've seen us playing better, and certainly when you see us at our best, and he's been able to get that little extra on top of that, that's when we've went and done special things like the European run. So like the European run is that was probably our best period. Well, I would say it was definitely our best period in terms of the way we were playing as a team. We weren't struggling through those games like we say, for example, we did in the 2008 run. We were stepping up to teams and we were playing confidently. And in games like that, Tav was coming out, and in terms of being a captain, the amount of times he scored the first goal in some of those key games and set that tone sometimes within 5, 10, 15 minutes. That's the parts that I think you're getting a little bit extra out. If the whole team is struggling, I forget the exact one. Was it St Johnstone? One of the ones that put us out, where the team was just struggling from start to finish, and the whole game was just, we were sloppily defending, which was what let them get their winner. There's only so much he can do about that if the team is playing like that in a game, which in knockout games is when you do get caught. But there is a point where I think you can make the argument over time that, you have to maybe say, well, should he be doing more in those games? Is he not doing enough in those games? Is he only doing it when the going's already good? I think would maybe be the argument that you could make. And I would have a bit of time for that. But in general, I don't think it's true that he's not been there in big games. I think most of the time, and if you look at a lot of the big games, even if we've lost, a lot of the times he's been one of the better players, the one that makes as much difference as he does. I think the Celtic games are probably one of the best examples of that, because if you look back through a lot of those games, particularly league games, it's him that's gotten our goals or gotten assists and things like that. He's gotten our most in the last 9 league games against Celtic. So he's making differences, but if no one else is there to add to that, it doesn't matter. Like when we lost 3-2, where he scored both goals, but I mean, it doesn't really matter if he scored both goals if we lose. Obviously, Maida, there's a big issue there. At this point, I'm actually starting to feel sorry for him that we're not doing anything to seemingly fix that. The goal was so inevitable in that game in terms of how it came about. I mean, there's a number of errors on the left-hand side as well, but the fact that at the very last error was Maida getting in because of his pace against Tavernier, I'm just sitting there going, why have we not done something to fix that yet? Because we used to have things in place to do that. Goldson used to slide across really well. Jack would cover really well. It looked like in some of the previous games that Barron was doing a bit of that play that Jack used to do. So where was it in that game against the most dangerous opponent we'd come up against yet? I don't know. But, I mean, people use Maida a lot in the argument. And it's like, well, Maida only joined Celtic in 2022, I think. So it took them up until 2022 to find someone to be able to match up to Tavernier. So that's unfortunately just right. They found a player who's got his number. That'll happen. So we then have to go, well, if that's the case, how can we address that? You can do that in 2 ways. You either stop playing Tavernier in those games, or you have to put a tactic in and to sort it out. and we don't seem to be doing that.
No, I agree. Ross, what is it about him that divides opinions? So, and it's not even some people. There's not really a lot of middle ground, is there? I mean, there's I'll not name check him because he's not here to defend himself, but we have a regular commenter who is very, very visceral against James Tavernier as a whole. What is it that causes this dividing opinion?
There's a lot to unpack in that one, I think. Firstly, I think that there's the first one is it's the fact that we have potentially not potentially, we have certainly under succeeded in recent years, and he is the captain and therefore bears the brunt of all of our frustrations. That I would say that's number one. Number two is that he's not a loud vocal leader necessarily. He's not a scream in your face. He's not a high, big tackles and flying into stuff and that sort of kind of commitment that you'd see from some other players. So I think that one leaves fans a little frustrated because if we were on the pitch, that's what we'd be doing. I'm not saying it's the right thing to do, but that's certainly how we would probably be reacting. And then I guess the last one is that a lot of the goals have seemingly come from him, and I think that for me is probably the most valid of the three points, that actually there is a frailty in the way he plays. Now, in terms of the person himself, I think he's a Yorkshire lad, so I've got a fondness for him anyway. But he seems like a very likable person, someone that genuinely cares, and someone that really wants to perform to the best that he can. He's never someone that shirks away from responsibility. I think maybe there's once or twice when I think he'd missed a couple of penalties in a row that he let someone else take the penalty just to kind of get the monkey off his back. But he's very rarely one that is goes anonymous. He's definitely there, whether it's for a good reason or a bad reason. He's always normally having an impact, albeit this season probably not as much as in others. So there's quite a few different things in there for me, and I think that the division between the support purely stems from a frustration at Rangers. I'd say that's probably what it is. Now, I put something on our WhatsApp group earlier on, and there are the amount of people that you hear online that will see someone put something on and just think, oh yeah, they're right. Yeah, he's angry, so I'm angry too. And before you know it, there's a tidal wave of anger and frustration. It used to be Goldson and Tavernier. It used to be those two. You couldn't separate them as players because they were just both the target of. But it's very short memories. And these players have been pivotal in any of the success that we've had. And there hasn't been loads of it, but what success we have had. So. I would love to see how Tavernier would be playing if he had the full backing of the support. Put it that way, because these players are human. That these things will impact them, and undoubtedly he will feel the frustrations when he's being squared up to, when he comes off, out at Ibrox and getting dogs abuse from sort of fans or wannabe fans who think it's the right thing to do. I'd love to see if, when it came to this, Clement had come out and said, you know what, he's our captain, he's our player, he's brought a lot of positivity to this Rangers setup over the past how many years he's been with the club, 9 years, 10 years. Let's get behind him. Let's show support, and let's put sort of let's look at all the good things that he does. And I bet his confidence would shoot up. And as I say, he's a human being, and players are confidence based as well. So yeah, it's a frustrating one. But going back to your point, I can see why fans do get frustrated. So it's a real tricky one to balance and have a balanced view on. But yeah, for me, I look back at Tavernier's impact on Rangers, and overall, it's been hugely positive.
Let's have a look. We are going to circle back to talk about that abuse that he received last week a little bit later on. But let's have a look at this slide that Doug's done for us. Dave. The bottom figure there is the average. Doug, can you tell us where these figures come from again? Sorry.
Yeah, so this is on SofaScore for those of you who are visit that website. For most players, they'll have a wee dial in the top right-hand corner that gives you a score for each of the areas along the top there: attacking, technical, tactical, etc. So the scores out of 100. And just gives you an idea of how that player is within the context of the wider world. So the numbers here, the grey ones along the bottom are sort of the average figure for fullbacks. I'm not 100% sure if that's just in total or if it's for our league specifically. The site doesn't really specify. And then the numbers above are Tavernier's specific marks from September 21 across down to 24, because it gives you the last 4. So you can kind of see the trend in terms of how they, anyway, are rating him across those areas.
Now, Dave, I'll come back to you. So as subjective, it is one website's opinion, but what stood out for me is we've talked about his attacking ability. In fact, highlighted it earlier on in the show. But in every year, from 21, 22, 23, 24, his defending score has been higher than his attacking score.
Yeah. I mean, I guess firstly, this as I said, it's pre-going live, stats tell you information, obviously. They are useful to a degree. However, I don't think they necessarily always tell you the full story. Now, I would imagine, and I mean, Doug, you'll know way better than me, mate, but I would imagine his defending stats are probably reasonably influenced by the fact that we don't defend so much as a team. And Doug, I could be speaking absolute nonsense there, so please jump in if I am. But, as a team, we don't defend massively in a lot of games. There is some elements of defensiveness needed, but just as an example, if you've got a team coming at you all game and you're trying to make 20 tackles and you make 10 of them, then, that's 50% success rate in your tackles. If you're playing a different game and you have 2 attacks coming down that side and he succeeds in both of them, then, he's made 8 less tackles, but as a percentage, his rating would be 100%. So I'm not convinced he's as bad as some people make out. I mean, if you listen to some people, the guy couldn't defend a fart, let alone, a game of football. But equally, I don't know that this necessarily suddenly tells us, actually, Tav's a really good defender.
Let's come back to you on that, Doug. How do you kind of defend I know they're not your figures, but do you defend the stats over the eye test?
I think the key point is the comparison to the average. So we remember here that this is comparing Tavernier to other fullbacks. So if you look at the average figure for the fullback attacking, it's 38, and Tavernier is significantly above that. He's like 20 above that all the time. So that tells you Tavernier, in comparison to other fullbacks, is way ahead when it comes to attacking. And I think that's safe. We can safely say that that's pretty true. And his defending, it looks like, his defending's way better. But if you think about it, rather than sort of in comparison to attacking defending, think of it as defending against the average. Well, the average defense is 62. He's not hugely above that. So he's only just above average defender most of the time. And last year, he ranked as being a below average defender. And I think a lot of people would probably agree with that statement. So I think it's these particular ones, because they're averages of averages in a way. So they are kind of watered down a bit in terms of stats are better if you're specific and provide them in wider context. And these are very general without huge amounts of context. So I think the value in these are viewing them vertically rather than horizontally, because I think that's where they make the most sense. Again, if you look at the creativity, his creativity is well and above that of an average fullback, which is also, I think, true. That's why he gets so many assists. So I think that's the more valuable part for that particular slide, rather than comparing the attacking to the defending.
Well, staying on the subject of criticism, Gross, you mentioned that the fan that approached them outside the Viablix after the Hotham game. For me, it's out of order. That's just my personal opinion. I imagine, doing that to a movie star when you didn't like one of their movies or something like that. It's his job. He plays football. Yeah, he's a captain. He would have been gutted as well at the end of the day. for me, it's not something I want to see. What was your, because you know, it was all over social media just after it happened, and people seem to be gleefully posting it on the you know, X and Instagram and things like that. What did you make of it?
Well, I mean, firstly, social media makes everything 100 times worse, doesn't it? I mean, I dare say back in the day when players had underperformed, there would be a very similar treatment, but it's probably just that it's recorded now, and you know, keyboard warriors will just sit there and repost it and think it's hilarious, and it in some way alleviates some of the pain and of what was a really poor Rangers performance that day. So for me, it's 100% completely out of order. As you rightly said, in any other profession, if that happened, it would be disgraceful, and it is disgraceful. I don't think he deserves that. I don't think anyone just going, you know, doing their job should face that level of toxicity, and you know, there's a load of other words that you could say with it as well. So yeah, for me, completely out of order. Not to say that we're not frustrated, we're all frustrated, but you know, it's pretty juvenile and pretty childish to go and actually take that frustration out on the player who the game's done, the game's finished. Do you want to win your next games, or do you just want to leave a lasting message with that guy that he's not in the fans' favor? You know, what's your response? I think it's just a mistimed and yeah, very short-sighted approach at taking frustration out.
Do you think maybe the club should have done more to keep the players and the manager away from the fans after the game like that? David, you're nodding. I'll come to you.
Yeah, I do. I think there's not one of us that wouldn't have expected some level of toxicity there. You know, maybe not to the extent of what happened, but I think we were all more than aware that was going to be a highly toxic atmosphere. And I think actually, to an extent, the club have got a duty of care to both the players and the manager. You know what? We're all hurting after that game, absolutely. And to be blunt, as the captain, I think it is okay to blame him for an extent, because that's what leadership is. You know, you take the success, and unfortunately, when there's negatives, you take it. But I do agree with Ross. I think that was a line stepped over. My main concern, though, is, and I'd like to think this wouldn't happen, but you just never know. What if that had actually been worse than what it was? We're all sitting here talking about, oh, this was terrible, and it was, right? I'm not getting away with that. As I said, I think there was a line crossed there, but that could have very easily been actually a lot worse than it was. And I'm sorry, but there was a couple of security guards that, you know, if something really bad had happened, then they're not stopping it. So for me, yeah, I think absolutely the club should have been doing more. I think there's a duty of care concern there, to be honest, mate.
Well, Dave King did come out with a statement. I think, is this the full statement, Doug? I don't know if I've kind of read the paraphrasing as well.
It's not the entire one, though. It's just most of the.
I'll read so people. I'll read so people can see. So Dave King said, Rangers supporters are loyal supporters, turning on a captain who has been 100% loyal to Rangers, and memories are short repeatedly, saved us in key games for a decade, is the opposite of loyalty, and I hope that most supporters will join me in condemning such behaviour. We have a challenging period ahead and need to pull together to get through it. Do you agree with him, Doug?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, I think like I said, there's nothing wrong with criticising a player and pointing out when they make mistakes. And Tavernier does make mistakes. No one's attempting to say that he doesn't. And he has, in the last 6 months, made more mistakes than he usually would do. So that's a valid criticism to have. We went into the Old Firm game knowing, again, you know, that Maeda is a difficult player for Tavernier. So, you know, that's something that we can criticise, that he's not good enough in that battle in certain respects. So, you know, those are things that are perfectly fine to criticise with, but you can't go about abusing people and, you know, just straight up. Fine, shout at them from the stands. That's where that is. That's where that is for. What that's for. I'd be curious to see all the people who are currently or who have been cheering on the boy that was having a go at him the other day, how many of them cheered on the Hibs fan that jumped on the pitch and had a go at him a couple of years back? Or did they condone that? So, is it's one for them and one for another? I think, again, it's that. For me, it's more the anger spilling over and the fact that Tavernier, under normal circumstances, a player staying at your club for 10 years is a good thing. It means they presumably played well and been consistent. The club has wanted them and they've wanted to stay with us. Because that's a period of time that doesn't happen very often nowadays, players staying at clubs that long. It's just, I think, unfortunately, because of the timing of when Tavernier has been here and obviously the lack of success across that time, the lack of success and his presence throughout that have become, in some fans' minds, just they're unable to separate the two. And so the rage at the club failing is also the rage at him. And that's obviously starting to boil over because I think a lot of people as well kind of just assumed and you would just put it aside on the assumption that he was 100% going to have left. And so the fact that he hasn't has just then made that all kind of boil over. And so in addition to being the captain, which obviously makes you the lightning rod anyway, and that's something that, he's taken criticism for a lot of his years. It's starting to grow exponentially now, which I think there comes a point where the club maybe needs to do something about that. Like, I was a bit disappointed, I have to say, that there wasn't anything that came from the club straight after that to say that's unacceptable from fans. The club should have been number one on their list that evening, never mind the next morning, to say, we understand this frustration, but that's not on. And I'm pretty disappointed they didn't, because they've got a duty of care to look after the players.
Ross, I agree with Dave King when he talks about the loyalty that Tavernier has shown. It just makes it frustrating when you read the comments from Twitter. I guess that's from people saying serial loser. It's like a meme that they're using nowadays, just it's thrown at Tavernier, that serial loser. I don't agree with that, and I also agree that they're showing a real lack of loyalty back to a player who's given us, a lot of years of his footballing career.
Yeah, completely agree. I think there's something in being accustomed to losing, though. So whether serial loser is something that's bandied about too much, and especially at Tavernier, I don't know, but there is something to do with losing a number of times and almost becoming comfortable losing. I'm not saying that is the case, but it could be that that's the way it's observed from the stands. Yeah, I can see that, and I guess playing devil's advocate with it, does Tavernier represent a team that has underperformed and has been dominated in this city for too long? Probably. Is he symbolic of a past team that has progressed through and had its lifespan at Rangers and probably should be looking at new ventures? Probably, and I think we'll all probably agree with that. But that's not to say that anyone deserves any of this. That level of criticism, that's to do with his performances and to do with the team's performances. That doesn't mean that he needs to be the brunt of all of those issues and the anger, because it is a team game, as Doug rightly said earlier on in the pod. And Doug, I completely hear you and echo what you said as well. The club should have come out. The club should have come out and condemned it immediately and provided a united front. If I was James Tavernier, I would be a little bit gutted that the club hadn't come out and said, he's our captain. Why does it have to come from Dave King to say it? The club should be coming out and saying, this is our captain, this is our leader, get behind him, or don't come. Don't we don't want any of this aggression. We don't want this. On the stands, in the terraces, we've all done it. Shout your frustration on, fine. But squaring up to someone or going up to someone aggressively is completely intolerable, and the fan should be banned, indefinitely.
Dave, we'll move it on from the fan and the criticism. There really is only two options. We're hearing again that Tavernier is linked to moves to Turkey, moves to Saudi, moves to Qatar as well, I believe. Their transfer window, I think, is open till Friday. You might want to correct me if anybody knows better than that. So the two options is James Tavernier continues to stay with us, or James Tavernier moves on to another club. Both of those options come with implications for us. One, does he stay and then continue to play? Or two, does he go and does that leave us short? Let's just bring up and I'll let you come in on it, Dave, another slide. This is his record currently. Now, we're only at the beginning of the season. Is that good enough for you?
That's
a big sigh.
Yeah, I'm not sure it is, but at the same time, I don't know how much of that is influenced by kind of what he's done before, and I would say that is probably regression from where he was. I think, to be honest, the whole Tav going now thing is pretty simple for me. I firmly believe he should have been moved on in the summer. I think I've seen a few comments about it, and I tend to agree. I think he's now into sort of McGregor territory where he's just maybe stayed a bit too long. However, our window's closed. Now, all right, fine, you sell him, you save the wages. Who's going to play there? Sterling? Sterling's got a real injury issue, I would suggest. Struggles to kind of maintain fitness for a long time. So, that's debatable. And he certainly doesn't give you the attacking numbers Tav does. The new boy? Maybe. I mean, was he bought to play there? Was he bought to play centre-back? Or was he just bought as a utility backup that could play there?
Can I just come in, Dave?
Yeah.
Sorry. What's the new boy's name, Dave?
Casa, mate. Casa.
Sorry, mate. Sorry. Couldn't resist.
Big man Casa. But yeah, I mean, I don't think we know enough about him to say that he can just step in. And even there, it's 2 assists. That's not nothing. So for me, I think he's what we've got at the minute, I guess is what I'm trying to say. And I think regardless of his regression, which I do think is happening, I don't know that we've got anyone better than him right now.
And Doug, you put this together. I think that does show, even though it's only been 4 games, I think this does show a bit of a drop off. But if he goes just now, and do you personally think that these other players are going to step up? It could just be we need to change the way we play.
I think it will. I mean, one of the questions that I've not said it so much, I think, in this pod yet, but one of the questions that I feel always needs to be asked if we're asking this, if we're talking about Tav being not good enough now, particularly, but even at points in the last 2 seasons, the question has to be asked: why have multiple managers continued to pick him, and why does he still play 90 minutes every game? And in terms of the broader sense, why has he never been changed in terms of the captaincy? So managers must be seeing something. And in terms of, and I think this is, for me, it's kind of particularly coming out now, given that there's the increase in his defensive frailties, plus the fact that Clement said at the beginning of the season that Tav needed to play less minutes and shouldn't be playing every game, which is something I agreed with. I said that if he was going to stay, he had to play less because we had to start because regardless of whether he was staying or not, we had to start the sort of post-Tavernier transition. But the fact he's still playing 90 minutes every single week tells me, right, well, if the manager said he doesn't want him playing that all the time, and he seems to be getting worse as a defender, then to me, that must say that the manager must think he's bringing enough elsewhere to mitigate it. And I think that's where the issue is, and what you're touching on there is that it will fundamentally change the way that Rangers play. Because when you watch us play, Tavernier does play high up, even in Celtic games where he has, in terms of when Maeda's attacking, he has trouble with that. But he also, on the converse of that, keeps Maeda out of the game to some degree, because Maeda has to track him when he pushes up. if you looked at for example, the match just gone, if you compare Maeda and Kuhn on each side for Celtic, Kuhn is like way into our half for his average position, whereas Maeda's kind of sat in the halfway line because they were attacking down the left mostly. Because and that's partly because I think they sensed they could get some joy from there, which they did, but also because they have to account for the fact that we have a right back that plays halfway up the pitch half the time, and that involves him obviously in a lot of our play. And those stats that you had up a minute ago, I think, still reflect, because obviously a lot of the numbers are small, but we've only played 5 games in the league. That he's still up there in the top group of assisters right now. He's still up there in the top in terms of making key passes. He's still up there at the top in terms of making big chances. So he's still a fulcrum of our creative play. So, and to me, that's why he's still in the team, and that's why he's still played 90 minutes. And therefore, if we're taking him out, we're going to have to change that, unless the new guy, whoever it may be, is able to replicate some of that. I don't think Sterling will be able to. So, but I don't know enough about Castan Virgil. Either way, I've never until I spent a couple of minutes sitting going how to pronounce this. I'd never heard of him. So maybe he can, and if he can, that's great, because then it allows us to continue. But if not, it will require us to maybe change the way we play, because we won't have this almost extra man in that attacking area of play, because he is always up there. Whereas traditionally our left full back has always been attacking, but not to the same degree. So it will change things.
Can I?
Oh, sorry, the end. Oh, you go, Dave. Yep.
Yeah, I just wanted to touch back. So, Doug, you were talking about the positions of the players, and Maeda's average position being the halfway line. Is it not just as simple for? He might well have been on the halfway line, but he scored.
That's what I'm talking about. Like in terms of the defensive frailties, when he's in the positions to do so, he can take advantage, because he's got the run on Tavernier in terms of pace. But like a lot of people think, just by automatically putting in Sterling, that it will be better because Sterling will defend better. Yeah. Now, that could be an argument, and you could say that, but let's just say we've got another right back who's a great defender, and we know he's a great defender. So you put him in there, it will still fundamentally change how the right side of that pitch is operating. Because if he's someone that sits back more, that will allow Maeda to become more up onto him. Which one of two things happens then. Either he's a good enough defender to just win those battles, in which case Quid's in, you're happy, or Maeda gets the better of him too, but instead of getting 2-3 chances a game, gets 6-7 and maybe scores twice as many. Because again, one of the other points I made in the pre-Celtic games was that until that point, in the last 8 games, Maeda had only scored twice with no assists, versus Tavernier having scored 5 with 1 assist. So in terms of that as a one-on-one battle, we were net positive. But and that dynamic changes if you have a more defensive player. It changes the way we play, but it will also change how opponents come up to us, because, as I say, opponents can go, right, Tavernier's a weak defender, so that's something to keep at, stay on top of him, try and get past him. But they also have to go, Tavernier's a very attacking defender, so we're going to have an extra man to worry about when Rangers are in the attacking phase of play. We'll have to track him, because he has the ability to cross the ball, to make decent passes, to score goals. So, the type of player that we replace him with doesn't just change how we approach the game, it'll change how our opponents do as well.
Ross, I'm conscious of the time, so I'll come to you. Kind of closing comments, I guess, but where do you see James Tavernier's legacy being in 10 years' time? If he did finish with us this week, where do you see the fans? What's your thinking of him in 10 years' time?
Maybe not. Maybe it's a grandiose statement, but top 3 players in terms of the impact they've had on the club in my lifetime, certainly. And there's only probably another couple that I can think of that would be in that sort. Maybe even just one. Maybe just Barry Ferguson would be the other one that I think has had a tremendous impact. I'm struggling to think of anyone else who's had such a seismic and kind of, positive impact at times. It's the way we've played. I'll always remember him for the Europa League run. Always remember his goals, his free kicks, one away at Aberdeen and Dundee United, and just a fantastic right back who grew with the club as the club was growing as well, and getting back to where it would become part of the furniture. And I think he rightly is a Hall of Famer. I think he's led us through some difficult times, and so often it's the unspoken stuff that probably we will miss or that we will overlook, shall I say. And I think, as Goldson said last year, we won't know the value of money till he's gone. And I think I think that's a really true statement, and one that these guys on Twitter, when, as Doug said, these things, there's many different outcomes that could happen if we get someone else in. These people on Twitter will find someone else to blame, so it's almost, how do you cut that noise and try and for me, look, I would like to keep him in the setup, but phase him out this season. I don't think we've got anyone, for what it's worth, to replace him at the minute. So he's the best we got. Keep him in the team. Give the guy the respect and the plaudits that he deserves, because he's been a fantastic servant and someone that I'll look back on very fondly.
Well, thank you very much for coming on this evening, Ross. Thank you for
having
your comments. Doug, I'll come to you next. What's your final thoughts on the James Tavernier enigma?
Yeah, I mean, my main thought is that I just feel sad that someone that I consider to be a modern day great Rangers player is obviously getting the hate he does. I think a couple of people have said in the comments it's similar to kind of what happened at the end with McGregor, but on a much kind of bigger degree, where maybe he has just overstayed his welcome slightly. I have been saying, as much as I am a fan and I do think he still has things to offer, I have been saying that it is the time to start phasing him out in terms of the change of era, if you want to do all those things. I do think new captaincy, new voices, and having new players does achieve all that. And so, as sad as I'd have been, I'd have understood letting him go. The time to have done so, however, was in the window. I feel like now letting him go, if they're going to do it, then fine, just do it. If you're going to get some money in, that's a benefit. I don't really see much benefit in signing someone. I don't think there's anyone out there really worth it. Just go with what we have. But that's just the main thing. I think it's sad, and I do hope as time passes that people obviously do eventually focus on the good, because in my opinion, the Europa League run on its own is enough for him to be in the Hall of Fame. Never mind the other stuff. People say he's not got enough trophies or anything else. The way he played during that run of games and getting us that final, for me, that alone was worth it. The memories that run gave, that I will never forget. And he was a huge part of that. And as I say, I hope that will be his legacy rather than anything else.
Well, Doug, thank you very much for the slides you prepared for this the show this evening. Great as always, and thank you for your comments. And Dave, I'll leave the kind of final word with you on your thoughts on James Tavernier.
It's dangerous. I think Doug was bang on when he mentioned about McGregor. I think it's sort of a similar idea. He's potentially just stayed a wee bit too long. I think in relation to how he'll be remembered, I think once the kind of emotion dies down a bit, 5-10 years time, I think people will recognize Tavernier as a player for what he gave to us. If I'm being honest, I think as a captain, he won't be so fondly remembered. As I alluded to earlier, part of leadership, you take the successes, you take those Europa League runs, and you rightly get the plaudits for those. But equally, if we're being honest, it's been a pretty lean period for us as a club. We've seen our greatest rivals go on to success after success domestically, and I don't think that fades as quickly. But as I said, I do firmly believe as a player, his value and contribution will kind of be more fondly remembered once this kind of emotion of the current period dies down.
Well, thank you very much, Dave. Thanks for coming on, and thank you all three I guess panelists, what we call ourselves. We have loads more shows coming every day this week. If you'd be interested in joining up to a membership page, it's 99 pence a month, and there's extra shows in there. Please consider that, and obviously it helps the pod grow as well. And we enjoy doing this, so we want to continue doing it. If you are a podcast listener, you can access the pods after the show here on the usual podcast app. So Spotify, Amazon, and Apple Podcasts, wherever you get the podcast, please listen on there as well. If you like to do that, all the shows will be uploaded onto that. So thank you for watching. Thank you everyone for your comments. It just leaves me to say that every night is a Rangers Journal night. Goodbye.